Checking out the brand new 2022 Motorola Moto G Stylus. Now, the Moto G Stylus continues to be the most popular Motorola device sold here in the US. It's one of just 2 devices nowadays that offers stylus support, and it's also, in my opinion, the best bang for your buck Motorola device overall. I'm going to go over what's new, what's changed, and everything else you need to know. First things first though, let's just quickly go over the unboxing experience so you can at least see what comes inside the box when you buy one. Now, I don't think Motorola has changed their packaging for like 3 or 4 years now, obviously, but inside the box, the first thing you get is the phone itself, of course. We'll take a closer look at that in just a second. Inside the first layer of cardboard, you'll find your usual stack of paperwork and instructions to help you learn about the phone, and a SIM ejector tool if you need it. And at the very bottom of the box, there's 2 more included accessories. You get a standard USB-A to USB-C cable for charging, and a disappointingly underpowered 10-watt wall plug, which, by the way, is the fastest charging speed this phone supports. With all that stuff out of the way, here is the new Moto G Stylus once again. This year it comes in 2 color options, Twilight Blue and this metallic rose, which is very much a shiny pink finish. Sort of unique and probably one of the pinkest phones I've seen. So right off the bat, I think you can tell that the new Moto G Stylus looks pretty similar to last year's, and certainly falls in line with most other recent Motorola devices. Physically, this is once again a 6.8-inch device. That's the screen size corner to corner, but you can also see that the display is still framed by the usual bulky Motorola bezels, with relatively thick borders all the way around, a slightly larger bottom chin, and while you still have a nearly 85% screen-to-body ratio, that extra edge certainly adds to the already big form factor. If you're coming from a previous Moto G Stylus, you're probably used to this big, tall design, but keep in mind that one-handed use might be a little tough for some people. Around back, the shiny metallic rose back cover seems to be all plastic, but the fit and finish honestly does look nicer, and I'm glad Motorola dropped the cheaper glossy look for something somewhat more premium. The edges and sides of the device feel like a thick metal or aluminum, and in the hand, there's plenty of weight to give the phone a good feel. The curved, tapered sides slope down just enough to keep the edges thin, but all in all, while the color is new and the Motorola logo changed spots, there really isn't any other major design or material upgrade. It's all the familiar Motorola fit and finish. Also, while you don't get an official IP rating, this phone does appear to have the same water repellent distinction as before. Taking a look around at everything else, on the left side you've got your dual SIM and SD card slot for expandable storage, which is great to see. On the right, the usual volume buttons and power button, which does double as your fingerprint reader. Towards the bottom, the headphone jack is there alongside the USB-C port for charging, single speaker setup, and of course, the whole point of the phone, the included stylus, which I'll talk more about in just a second. Up front, a center hole punch selfie camera now below the standalone earpiece, and around back, a new 50 megapixel triple lens camera setup. So let's talk more about that stylus. And if you were maybe hoping for some upgrades or some feature add-ons here, unfortunately, not much has changed. The stylus itself is once again located at the bottom of the phone off to the right. It has a spring-loaded top that allows you to pop it in and out with ease. And of course, when you do that, the phone will prompt you with a handful of stylus-specific apps and shortcuts that are unique to this device. The stylus itself hasn't changed much. It's still just a simple metal pointer tool. It's not connected to the phone in any way. It's not a smart Bluetooth accessory. There's no buttons or anything like that. It's no more advanced than a toothpick, but its smooth, rounded build and all metal construction at least make it feel somewhat nice and sturdy. The tip is still a squishy, rubbery material. It's not particularly pointy or precise, but all in all, it's there, it's made for this phone, and at the end of the day, like I said, this is essentially the only affordable stylus-paired smartphone on the market now. So if you want that, this is what you get. On the software side of things, the stylus-specific apps and shortcuts that Motorola offers also haven't changed either. In fact, all the apps and things are the same as before, as far as I can tell. You get Motorola's own Notes app that you can use to make lists, draw pictures, whatever you want really, and this is pretty straightforward. There's the screenshot capture shortcut, coloring book, which seems to have all the same default pictures as last year, shortcut to keep notes, the camera app, and you can still swap out whatever apps you want in that shortcut menu, whether they're stylus apps or anything else. And that's nice. You can also install any other stylus supported Android apps that you can think of that you want to use yourself. So on the one hand, the stylus support is somewhat versatile, but like I said, unfortunately, Motorola just doesn't appear to have added anything or made any changes, both on the software side or with the stylus hardware. So that's a little disappointing. And when it comes to actually using the stylus, drawing, writing, and tapping and touching with it, well, that's all pretty much the same too. You can still use the stylus as you would your finger to just navigate through the phone. And I know a lot of people like to use it this way. You can touch and swipe in all the same ways you would your pointer finger or thumb. And for some folks, this is easier and more precise. So I can see the appeal. You can also, of course, draw and write with the stylus. You can make notes or lists, color, create some pictures, but you are still going to have that same sort of delay or lag when writing that you'll absolutely have to get used to. And while you can kind of differentiate, say, thick and thin lines, it's not a pressure sensitivity thing, it's just the size of the tip. And you can see that similar effect with my finger too. There's no shading support, no advanced tilting with the pen tip. It's just your super basic stylus setup from start to finish. And I don't believe Motorola made any stylus specific input changes at all. So you'll still see that gap where the pen tip is and where the line is on the screen. And this is still just a product of neither the phone nor the stylus being connected to or otherwise made specifically for one another. The only thing that's sort of changed with the display is now it's a 90 Hz screen. So it's technically a little more responsive and maybe a little quicker overall as you navigate through things on the device, whether that be with your finger or with the stylus. But when we're talking stylus specific stuff here, all in all, Motorola just has not really added to or even changed the stylus experience over the last couple of years on this phone, and I think that's a big miss. So that's the story with the stylus on the new 2022 Moto G stylus. Now let's talk about all the other elements to this device. And jumping back to the display really quickly, this phone has generally the same screen setup that we've seen before. The 6.8-inch display is an IPS LCD panel. It comes in at a resolution of 2460 by 1080 and packs in around 396 pixels per inch. The viewing experience overall is pretty good. Like I said though, nothing new and nothing particularly special. It's bright enough, it's colorful enough with a default saturated color profile, and the resolution is fine considering Motorola tends to offer 720p displays on some of their other devices. So I don't really have anything to complain about. And like I mentioned, the new add-on is 90 Hz, which you can enable in settings as either a dynamic mode or continuous 90 Hz mode. Now, like I said, this does give the new Moto G stylus a slightly faster, more fluid, more responsive feel overall, but it's really the only upgrade we got. And while it's nice to have, it's relatively minor. All in all, what you see is what you've had on most of the previous Moto G phones here. A big display for sure, but nothing really that stands out. And as far as the out loud listening experience, Motorola still refuses to bring back the dual speaker setup that they offered a couple of years ago. This phone is stuck with a single downward firing speaker once again, which is fine, but I just don't get why Motorola doesn't bring back the better speaker setup that they used to have. So when it comes to the specs and performance and software experience, this is sort of a mixed bag on the new Moto G stylus. On the one hand, getting 128 gigs of built-in storage, SD card support, and 6 gigs of RAM is all a great start. But this phone is now powered by the MediaTek Helio G88 processor. Previous Moto G styluses were Snapdragon phones. It's a nearly 2-year-old chipset. And on top of that, this new 2022 device still ships with Android 11 and the security update from December of last year. Last but not least, let's talk cameras. Now, fortunately, I have plenty of good things to say here. Starting with the hardware specs, the new triple lens camera setup consists of a 50 megapixel f1.9 aperture main shooter, a very useful 8 megapixel 118 degree ultra wide lens, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor for portrait shots. The selfie camera seems to be a little different too. It's now a 16 megapixel f2.2 aperture aperture shooter, and actually just snapping a few test selfie pics, things generally look okay, but you can tell there's a ton of excess processing. There's skin smoothing, beautifying. It looks a little weird, but the foundation is there at least. The camera app has plenty of modes and features to work with, including ultra high res with a 50 megapixel lens, dual camera capture, night mode, slow-mo. I'm glad Motorola dropped the unnecessary macro setup. There's no reason to have that, but I'm disappointed to see that they haven't brought back 4K video still. I think there's generally a good overall setup here and lots to be happy about. And actually, what impressed me the most were just the quick sample shots I took just to test things out. The rear lens setup honestly does a great job capturing plenty of detail, keeping the color balanced, delivering an accurate, true-to-life looking shot with just a slight bump in color. The camera setup to me seems to be much improved, and I'm excited to put this to the test in my full review. I think for just your everyday shooting, you're going to end up getting some great looking pictures out of this thing. So overall, the new 2022 Moto G Stylus is more of a continuation of last year's phone rather than an outright upgrade. Some things have changed. There's a fresh design, 90Hz display, 6 gigs of RAM standard, and upgraded camera, but some elements, like the single speaker setup, slow charging speeds, and less than ideal processor, make me feel like Motorola still compromises for no good reason. There's also the fact that the Stylus setup, the whole reason this phone exists, hasn't changed either. And that's most disappointing to me. But I still think this is the Moto phone to buy if you're in the US, and I suspect it'll be just as popular this year once again. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though, and I'll see you guys later.